I'm not saying I hope to get somebody like Walmart to take our product. We're already there. And so we're on the journey. So now it's purely a function of making sure that we have the right tactics to unlock consumer demand, continue to support our effort, the product on shelf, which is going to be purely the sales metrics as far as sales velocity and keeping Walmart happy. And then as we continue to do that, we will get more distribution.
Hello, and welcome to the Market Bull podcast. Please note, topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial or investment advice. Stephen Turner is the Managing Director and CEO of Nutritional Growth Solutions, listed on the ASX under code NGS. Now, NGS creates clinically proven nutritional supplements to support growth development in children and has a range of products on the market. Stephen discussed his history in the pharmaceutical industry with a particular focus on driving sales and the strategy he's used throughout the years. NGS is accelerating its growth in North America through its partnership with Walmart, and Stephen talked about how this is so influential for the company and how it's going to help them become cash flow positive. I hope you enjoy listening. So hello, I'm Ben Kostrich, and this is the Market Bull podcast. Joining me today on the show is Steve Turner, the Managing Director and CEO of Nutritional Growth Solutions. He's been a part of the company. He was previously the president of the North American segment of the company, but became the MD March of this year. It's listed on the ASX under code NGS, and it's in the child formulation supplement and just dietary component of the market. And they've had some ripper success venturing into the US market in particular. And that's where Stephen is going to discuss a lot of the episode about. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ben.
So talking about yourself, as I said, you've been at the company for quite a while, but there's a fair bit of rich history about the origins of the company. But almost before that, I mean, what was your original career and focus, and how has it led you down this path to becoming the MD at Nutritional Growth Solutions?
It's a great question. It's funny. I look back and ask myself, how did I get where I am today? And, it's funny that my journey started in the mid 90s. I'd been out of university for many years. I was originally educated to become a biologist and a chemist and was looking for lab work and living in the Seattle, Washington, Pacific Northwest region in the US, sort of at the front end of sort of the biotech boom. And Seattle was kind of a mini Boston, mini Bay Area when it came to companies like Immunex and Zymogenics and others. And so, of course, that's where I wanted to work. Um, Fast forward a few years of just futile efforts, I ended up finding myself working in healthcare as a laboratory technician and medical technologist. And so then I was on the sort of healthcare services side of the lab and really actually enjoyed it. So then it sort of piqued my interest into seeing, maybe where I should take my next path as far as education is concerned. So I had aspirations to actually go to medical school, was accepted in the University of Wichita School of Medicine, was going to go off and get my secondary degree and physician's assistant certification so that I could take the less costly pathway forward as far as insurance purposes. And then I had a former colleague friend of mine that I grew up with that was also in the process of going to medical school that called me out of the blue and introduced me to an individual in a company that really sort of completely derailed my plans. So I met an individual that was an innovator, entrepreneurial startup type of a mindset. He was a product and a company maker. He was a former U.S. national cyclist, created a variety of different things along the way, including gargoyle sunglasses, Bell helmets, and so on and so forth. And so he was with this company that was in the feedlot and probiotic space prior to really that market even existing in the US. So the company originally goes all the way back to 1983. And he had this wonderful idea of deciding he wanted to go public. And of course, learned through the School of Hard Knocks that there really wasn't any fundamentals in the business to support being a public entity. And all of a sudden, he had the headache of a board and shareholders basically trying to push him towards finding other ways to grow the business. And so I came on board with that particular group because it was as they were sort of seeking to reinvent themselves. They were looking at acquiring technology from academia, and he just didn't understand it. So he needed somebody with a strong core science background, the ability to kind of understand a little bit more about how everything is working, plus sort of get into the back pocket of the researcher at Temple University, which is where it all started. And so that was really the role that I was originally tasked with. And the reason I was interested in it was because it was it sort of met a lot of my core makeup, the things I like to do, which is being the puzzler, the problem solver, whether it's building houses, building cars, or just working with my hands. I love some of the aspects where you basically step into a particular challenge and then try to figure out, how do I fix this?
Mm.
And so this, in a lot of ways, sort of catered to my mindset. And it also, because it was rooted in science and gave me the ability to basically sort of figure out where I needed to go. Ultimately, I found myself completely managing all of the technology transfer activities, getting a crash course basically with these researchers as my mentor, getting involved so deeply in the drug delivery space, which was the space that we were exploring, that became my profession. And that's where my expertise was for a good 15 years. So a lot of my patent work, a lot of my research publications, and a lot of the stuff that I did started right there. And what I was effectively was basically a translator between the business and the science side because they don't speak the same language.
No, you're gonna need the
Um,
translator.
Right. And so later in life, I elected to actually go back and get my MBA in my 40s because that was a tool chest that I needed to round out because I'm a tech guy, I'm a science geek. Whenever you talk to me, whenever you see me do my sales meetings, it's very technical oriented because
Mm.
I like to really try to become a subject matter expert in anything that we're working in, because I feel it's important when you're doing sales, when you're trying to grow the business, that you understand the technology intimately enough that you can also help sort of connect the dots both internally but also with your business partners. We spent a good 15 years. And what was interesting was that was really my first opportunity also to live and breathe through the full corporate structure. So we were a small pink sheet OTC bulletin board traded company in the US. We were a penny stock, much like NGS is. And we went from basically being sort of a side part of the company to being really the hopes and aspirations of the entire entity. So
Mm.
then we spent time divesting off the non-core parts of the business. I was involved in every one of these aspects. We raised money and over the period of about 6 or 7 years. We probably brought in about $90 million worth of funds. I participated in every single one of our raises. And I also participated in every bit of our business development because that was what I needed to do, basically being the lead head of research innovation for the company. And so some days I'd find myself sitting across the table from an MD analyst on $1 billion fund, whereas the next day maybe I'm sitting with the technical team doing transfer some of our early phase work with the science group at Pfizer, for example.
Mm.
So it required me to sort of constantly pivot and maneuver. So I was an officer in that company, ultimately working my way up through the structure, was involved in all of our board activities. We went through Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. We were an accelerated filer. We went from 15 cents a share to well over $8 a share just after we had done some partnerships with Wyeth Consumer. And I was really heavily sort of seeing my pathway with the technology that I was a profession of, continuing towards this consumer product space, because everything that we did was essentially creating a better mousetrap for a large drug company or a consumer products company to then wrap the technology around it so they could then go to market and defend it.
Mm.
So for example, I developed long-acting ibuprofen, and with Wyeth, we were basically aspiring to create Advil 12-hour. So of course, Advil being $1 billion global entity or more, saw value in using intellectual property to basically protect and defend so that they could do what others couldn't for at least a period of time. So that's what I did for 15, 16 years. Ended my tenure with that group actually being CEO of that company at the very end of it. So I got to live the full cycle of sort of how you build out of the mud, separate it off from the core entity, rise in valuation, and see the fall and collapse on the back end of it.
Mm.
I wish that was a wonderful story and that I was able to capitalize on all my options that I had at $8 a share, but
Mm.
that's why there's one Apple and one Microsoft. So, I learned a lot. I was young, I was in my 40s, and it was just a really good experience sort of to live and go through that journey. That ultimately then transitioned into my next stages. And so every one of these little steps just continued to push me down this consumer products pathway.
Mm.
So we had done a lot of proving work on the technology when I was at the first company in the dietary space because we had a facility and a manufacturing plant that made tablets and capsules for dietary supplements. So I was able to use it, pick core common ingredients like vitamin C, classic, water soluble compound that it was just easy to monitor so that we could basically test the technology. So the funny part about the very end of that company is I had a handful of dietary supplements using long acting or sustained release technologies that we ended up taking to market, and they actually worked. And so that's where I started my relationships with Walmarts, with the Walgreens, with the CVSs of the world, because I basically developed products, sold them into these companies with the initial naivete, assuming I could create a brand out of nothing, and then pivoting to basically being the house brand or private label for every one of these retailers. And we were actually had a great little business. It was doing tens of millions of dollars of sales a year, but it wasn't quite what our board and what our shareholders had hoped for with this great drug technology. But it was a means to an end. Ultimately, I was a strong believer in you only get so much time to talk. Eventually, you have to execute and you have to put points on the board. And we had a lot of technology and a lot of these great things that we had been doing on the early side, but never completed things to the end where we had a finished product. And so the last 3.5 years that I was running the company, that's basically what we were doing. And it just unfortunately didn't quite live up to the expectations of what everybody wanted. But it was our reality. We survived the 0809 recession. The markets had collapsed. We were lucky not to be a casualty at that time. But eventually, our ATM on Wall Street ran out and that company folded. I got gobbled up by a large multinational out of India because of my work in ibuprofen. And that transition into the next phase of my career path was, let's bring Steve in because we are a generic drug company and we do not understand OTC. And we have a vast array of items in our portfolio that are either switching to OTC approval or already are, and they're just sitting there and we're not really taking advantage of them. So I helped build a consumer business within Strides Pharma. And that was an interesting experience for me as well, because I didn't relocate. I was still living and working out of Seattle, Washington, but commuting into New Jersey once a month, as well as every quarter into Bangalore, India, in order to basically sort of help connect all the dots. And we were able to get Strides Consumer up and running and off the ground. And that was another interesting challenge because, again, I had to help direct the conversation internally. So as you can imagine, generic drugs, prescription drugs in general, is a very different sales cycle because it's just a matter of who's on the formulary, who has approval, and then you're just transacting with the pharmacy. You don't ever really talk to the consumer.
No.
Whereas with consumer goods, just getting it on the shelf is the first step in the journey. The most important part is you got to get it off the shelf. So in order to do that, you have to create demand and you have to talk to the consumer. And so it was a very different way of looking at the business. And so I helped them sort of get to the point of recognizing that they sort of needed to do certain things, acquire certain assets, and basically think differently, which is oftentimes why the consumer products companies within pharma are typically separated. In some cases, they're literally separate companies, but at least they're typically, brick wall between them because they have to operate in a very different vein. So after I left Strides, I went to work for a company called Pharmacare, which is actually a Warrietown, Sydney based business. They share a driveway with Blackmores, or the former Blackmores group in Warrietown. And they had a division in the US for their America side of the brands. And so I was actually asked to come down and step in for one of my professional friends as she was moving on to work for H&H and Swiss wellness products, to run and eventually run and take over for the America side of Pharmacare US. Biggest brand we had in the stable, again, consumer products oriented. Everything in this particular company was dietary supplements. And so I was transitioning from generics and OTC common core drugs over to dietary supplements again. But we had a nice item within the portfolio that was around an $18 million a year asset for us at the time. And this is 2018. And that was our Sambucol brand, which is a elderberry-based antiviral dietary supplement to help with cold and flu remedies. And then we got lucky, or it was by design, depends on who you ask. We were able to capture lightning in a bottle, and we had a single social media post, so social marketing example, that was shared right at the height of when There was a shortage in IV bags. Tamiflu was actually out of stock, and we were having a really bad flu season. So a nurse basically posted, "Here's my go-to remedy," and it showcased our product. And she said, "Go to Walgreens. That's where it's sold." We went from zero to out of stock within 6 weeks nationwide with the entire brand. Ended up finishing the year almost $10 million over what we had forecasted and completely out of inventory for the next 5 months. Because the
Jeez.
way that that product is made, it was harvested one time a year, and there's no way you can anticipate that. So fast forward over the next 18 to 24 months, we literally went from $20 million to north of $150 million in sales on one item within our portfolio. So of course, needless to say, the original plan of me taking over obviously sort of got kicked down the road a bit because we didn't want to disrupt anything because it
Mm.
was just crazy money that was coming into the business. And in the Americas division, in that case, was actually supporting virtually every other vertical within the global organization of Pharmacare. And so that was what I did. So again, leveraging all the relationships and all the work that I've been involved with in the consumer product space, mainly OTC and dietary supplements since the mid 90s. And interestingly enough, every time I've been in one of these company opportunities, we've always had relationships with groups like the Emerson Group, for example, which is a large sales agency organization in the US that when I started working with them in the early 2000s, they were 400 in total annual turn with the brands that they helped manage. Now they're north of 6.5 billion. If you actually looked at the scope of their business, they're probably the fifth largest consumer products company in the world. But all they do is help companies like us sell product by connecting the dots. It's all about the relationships. And so eventually I'd love to get to the point where NGS is also partnered with somebody like the Emerson Group. But interestingly enough, I've been actually been able to find kind of the sweet spot for us because we're actually working with a group that was kind of what Emerson was 15 years ago to help us unlock and really hit above our weight. Because at the end of the
Mm.
day, we're a small but mighty team. We have a lot of contract and external virtual assistants that help us, and the agency partners, obviously, that make us appear and behave to be able to operate and much larger than what we actually are. So we can keep our burn low, keep the team lean and mean, but then leverage specialty groups like the Swanson Group, for example, to help us basically unlock and just do better than what we can do currently. So up until now, I've been sort of the chief bottle washer, chief architect, lead salesman, and everything. So all of the sales activities and everything that I was brought on board to do when Laurent hired me 2 years ago have been all my effort. So
Mm.
again, calling up the retailers, answering the phone, getting in, making the meetings, basically getting to competent enough within the product line that we have so that I can then speak to it in a manner where we then become listened to and believed, right? Because that's really the name of the game. It's perception, and it's also having so assets within your portfolio that give you a reason for being. And that's everything that NGS had on the surface. So when I was approached behind the scenes by the recruiting firm that stole me away from Pharmacare, um, the first thing I did was basically dig into the intellectual property portfolio, recognizing the fact that these weren't patent applications. They were actually issued patents, that it wasn't just one patent. It was an estate of over six pieces of intellectual property, digging into the science, reading the publications and the work that was done by the founding medical staff out of the Schneider Medical Center, reading the actual clinical trial results and sort of getting into it because it was important for me to understand, is it real? Is it something that gives us an opportunity because it's unique? And is it defensible? And that's sort of the checked all the boxes. And so that's what attracted me to come into NGS. And then the other part of it was everything I'd moved my family down to San Diego for when I came to take the position for pharmacare that didn't quite
Eventuate.
materialize.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, it's getting in, rolling up the sleeves and basically building a team from the ground up. So for the first 6 to 9 months, it was really evaluate and assess. I was told X, Y, and Z, you can't touch them, they're core. And then it was really getting in and going, yeah, are they really?
Mm.
Do you guys understand what it is we're trying to accomplish here? Sort of trying to make sure that the team was positioned with resources that understood retail, that understood consumer products, because that's what we are. Even though it's a children's nutritional supplement, it's a consumer product. So, it's like Pepsi mindset. It's like Lego mindset. That's what we basically have to treat. We need to have strong brand marketing focus. We need to understand how to understand what our consumer is, who she is, where she is, what is she as an individual, what is her basic demographic persona, so that we can make sure that when we have a conversation with her, we're doing it in a forum that she's going to be receptive to it, because we're starting from the ground. We have
Mm.
absolutely no consumer awareness. We have no distribution at the time that I started because it was just online. And as great as Amazon and Shopify is as far as e-commerce in North America, it's still only about 30% of the pie. You're not real unless you're present. And to be present, you have to be on shelf at the stores that you shop in, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise you're just lost in the fluff along with the thousands of other things that might be in the on Amazon on that page. And you may be 15 pages beyond the first two, right? So then it's you get lost in the weeds. And so for us, the critical part that I believed in, and the reason I was hired, was it was important for us to gain physical distribution, to get real about being retail friendly and retail ready, so that we can then start this journey of building points of distribution over time, so that when we get to a future, that the e-commerce piece of it is 30% of our top line, with the physical brick and mortar being 70% of our top line. In the US and North America in general, that's a healthy mix.
Mm.
If you're skewing one side or the other too heavily, then your eggs are all in one basket, and any little shock can decimate, your top line. And we were having all sorts of challenges because Amazon's a fickle beast. The pendulum swings one way, then the next month or year it swings the opposite direction, and any little disruption dramatically impacts your ability to generate revenues. So it's important for us to make sure that we're everywhere we can be. So then that's basically the journey that I set out on. So over the last year, we've basically been putting all the pieces together to capitalize on some of the opportunities that we earned. The biggest being distribution with Walmart. So Walmart is um, an interesting. When I look at it now, I can sort of see the the forest through the trees to some extent, and understanding at the time that the merchant team reached out to me. Abbott had still been closed in their manufacturing facilities in the U.S. for infant formula and toddler beverages. There was massive disruptions in the supply chain, and Walmart specifically was probably the most impacted. And they had 50, 60% out of stocks nationwide on their shelves. They're literally just bare shelves in departments that would normally be carrying product because they couldn't get it. And I think what happened was Walmart and retail in general learned what happens when you have basically a monopolized supply chain, because you only have one factory in North America that was approved to produce these types of products. The minute the doors are shut on it, nothing gets anywhere, including private label products. And so that started looking to basically find other opportunities. And so we were the benefactor of that environment. So again, um, while we're not a core direct toddler beverage, we have products within our portfolio that can compete in that space. And so that's what led us to getting the test at Walmart. And what's important to think about is Walmart in the US, and I would argue probably data wise globally, accounts for a third of all commerce. So the way you sort of got to get your arms around it is 34 to 35% of all commodity volume, basically of all goods sold, are sold by Walmart.
Yeah. Huge
It's a
distribution network.
massive
Yeah.
number. When you look at the magnitude of what Walmart is, even compared to Amazon, which is also huge, it's exponentially larger. So it's literally tenfold or more the total magnitude of business is done at Walmart than there is even done at Amazon. And so when you look at the market, especially in the US, we have roughly seven retailers that control all destiny. And you've
Yeah.
got thousands of retailers, but seven of them are core. Walmart's a third of the business. Walgreens and CVS constantly are battling for the high teens. The three of those retailers alone account for over 65% all commodity volume. And then we haven't even talked about Target, which is about 7%. Then you've got Rite Aid on the bottom end of what they used to be five. Now they're maybe two. There's some concerns or suspicions as to whether, they're going to survive, this continued evolution. And then you have
Mm.
Kroger, Albertsons, Safeway, the food giants basically gobbling up the rest. And so you have these seven suspects that are basically everywhere we would want to be in order to be considered a viable top tier brand. If you don't have distribution, then obviously you're not relevant to the consumer. And so that's sort of where I wanted to get to in 2 to 3 years' time. I didn't expect it to happen so
So
quickly.
quickly.
So
Yeah.
I'll pat myself on the back and take credit for it, of course. But at the end of the day, it definitely shortcutted the traditional path. Normally, a company like ours would start small. We'd look at independent, small, regional, local specialty grocers to basically try to carve out shelf space and then demonstrate success so that we can then use that to leverage to a larger super regional and eventually work our way towards getting to a national chain. So Walmart sort of jumped the shark on that all the way. And so what's great for it is we were awarded a meaningful number of doors, 408 to start, which has now grown to 465, to basically prove whether or not we deserve to be there.
Mm.
That was the biggest question because we're a premium play. We're also not what everybody else is, which is one of the things that's great about what NGS offers the consumer. We're not a meal replacement, we're a supplement to the meal with the right horsepower of ingredients in order to basically get the outcome that we've already proven in clinical trials. And so we're sort of not within the traditional frame of how retailers would normally view products like ours. Some people on the surface immediately position us as a protein powder, but we're not just protein. We're more than that, right? We're not a traditional toddler beverage or just milk substitute because again, it's engineered horsepower as far as the ingredients in the right ratios in order to deliver a desired impact within a given age range. We started off with our 3 to 9 formulation clinically shown to basically help with lean, healthy growth. 4 liquid ounce servings, which is a third or a half the size of the servings that you would see in traditional products in the market that are meal replacements. Higher quality ingredients, lower added sugars, basically all the right things that you would want to put in your kid in order to help promote growth and development. Then we evolved the line and did work specifically for preteen and teen boys. We've got formulation work that's going to eventually be introduced into the market specifically for preteen and teen girls. We have our universal, what I'll call Swiss Army knife formulation, which is the kids' protein range that's at Walmart. That's basically a super high quality nutritional mix that has 21, 26 vitamins and minerals, half of which are derived from fruit and veggie powder. So again, it's a tool in the chest that caregivers can use in order to basically get the nutrition in their kids that they need.
Mm.
And then, of course, we're just going to continue to evolve our line, but staying in our core focus between age 2 and 16, because those are the time frames that we have as caregivers to have the most impact on the outcome of our kids' lives and what they eventually become. And so that's really what drives us and what's unique about the brand. And so, interestingly enough, Walmart saw the opportunity. They were being, able to basically fit us into that particular location. Then we were also invited to participate in their open call process, which was new to me, even with as much time as I've spent with Walmart, because I've never had a brand that was manufactured, sourced, and produced in the US. We were always importing from Europe or wherever, so we didn't qualify. So we participated in an open call, and that was an interesting event, a 2-day event. Over 17,000 companies were applied. Only 1,000 were invited to participate. And of those 1,000, only 300 companies were awarded business, and we were one of them. And so it was
Jeez.
pretty cool in the sense that, we went and did this event, and the meeting that we had with the merchant went from being what should have been a total bust because he didn't completely understand what our product was. And so we walked into the meeting, and within 3 minutes, he realized, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. And so we were going to basically, shake hands and
Pack
call
up
it a
and go.
day, right?
Yeah.
But then what ended up happening was we sort of sat and talked, and then ended up sitting down for over an hour because I was able to help guide the conversation with him to find out what is it that he was actually looking for, and then talk through the pathway of basically saying, if we deliver on this, do we have a deal? And that was the net result that led up to the point of the product that we're actually in the process of launching right now, which is going into a different department in Walmart. Every merchant team is responsible for their own little fiefdom. And so now we have a new dietary supplement, digestive fiber supplement that's also a probiotic stick pack for kids that's launching in just under 800 doors at Walmart as we speak. And so now again, we've got another proving ground to be able to build and support on. So it really sort of points to the fact of what I'm trying to do with the company and with the brand and kind of where we're going is we have to sort of take this walk or crawl, walk, run type of mindset
Mentality. Yeah.
because eventually, and it's not an if, it's I'm not saying I hope to get somebody like Walmart to take our product. We're already there. And so we're on the journey. So now it's purely a function of making sure that we have the right tactics to unlock consumer demand, continue to support our effort, the product on shelf, which is going to be purely the sales metrics as far as sales velocity and keeping Walmart happy. And then as we continue to do that, we will get more distribution. That will continue to grow. And so we're going to be able to use Walmart basically as our catalyst or platform for growth. And because we're doing so well at Walmart, now you've got the other
Others paying
6.
attention.
Yeah, the other
Mm,
6 are watching and paying attention because now instead of them having to be the first mover and take the risk,
they're
now it's
following
about how
after.
quickly can I catch up? It's fear of missing
Yeah.
out. So and so that's ultimately what we're doing. So, we're onboarding with CVS, and it's with it started off with the EMOS and Navarro alternative formats, which is traditionally their segment that they use specifically for the Hispanic and Latin American consumer, Puerto Rico and the southern states, that very well could evolve into a relationship for CVS corporate because they want to set us up as a vendor specifically for all of CVS, even though we're starting off with a display activity that we're going to be doing in probably a few hundred similar magnitude of number of doors of what we're doing with Walmart. And then, of course, we just bolted on iHerb, which is essentially the rest of the world's e-commerce platform outside of Amazon, right? So we have now the ability to test US made products sold and manufactured off of my existing production lines here at a low risk in other markets in order to basically see, can we do digital commerce and build brand awareness that ultimately will also support our halo effect in the US. And all I'm risking now, of course, is small quantities of inventory I'm already producing. So I don't have to go and
Mm.
build new stuff. So doing it in a safer, more controlled manner. So it gets us access to Rakuten in Japan. It gets us access into Tmall JDE in a much safer environment where iHerb themselves is the merchant. They're the ones with the portal basically that the customers are
The
coming to.
gateway. Yeah.
And so we fund and support our item or our widget within their catalog, but they're doing all the heavy lifting that normally a company like us would have to do, and that's just a financial disaster. We lived that already, which is one of the things that we've cleaned up since I came on board in March. And so that's ultimately kind of our path. And I know I'm just running through a whole variety of different things, but at the end of the
Mm.
day, what's exciting about what we're doing, as long as we stay focused, we have a medical team and a current group of employees that really believe in what we're doing. And so instead of a traditional mission statement, we have what we call our belief systems. And our beliefs really are what drive us and really what drives the brand and drives the success of the company. And fundamentally, we're boiling it down to we believe every child on this planet deserves access to quality nutrition, and that we believe by providing access to quality nutritional products, that we can actually affect significant positive outcomes around the world. And so now we're on this journey, trying to take what was originally developed at Schneider specifically for a clinical need and continue to grow and evolve and capitalize on it. But of course, it's a long journey. There's numerous exits that could happen along the way, but it's all about basically focusing on the fundamentals, having a business that's right sized for the now, that's scalable for the then. And that's kind of the position that we're in. And so everything that I've done since March has really been let's right size it. Let's focus on what's working, eliminate the distractions
The
of
noise.
other
Yeah.
geographies for the time being so that we can have a future, get to cash flow positive as quickly as possible, and then invest our profits as opposed to shareholders' money in momentum and growth going forward. Look at other geographies and other market opportunities in a way where we're looking at it through the lens of what makes sense that helps us build equity in our brand globally and not just giving away the keys to to the castle just because it's easy,
Mm.
right? So less and less distribution, less and less white label, less and less letting other people do all the work, um, because it's not profitable for us. And then we don't have any control over ultimately what the products become, and more being a conscious custodian of building the brand, creating a global powerhouse for Healthy Heights, for Nutritional Growth Solutions, and then look at complementary opportunities along the way that we can continue to sort of round out our portfolio so that we have an assortment that's relevant, and an assortment that's basically allows us to capitalize on the opportunity. And shockingly enough, as it is, even with as what you would consider reasonably mature the U.S. market is, there's a significant gap that we're trying to capitalize on. So brands do a really good job of talking to consumers up until about 12 months. Then they don't start again until 60 years, or maybe if they're gym rats in their 20s and 30s. And so you've got this large gap, hence the opportunity for children's nutrition, specifically between ages 2 and 16, sort of being our sweet spot. And that's kind of where we're at. So I think we're ideally positioned to be not only a great company and a great brand, but really a leader in this space. When you look at sort of the groundswell that we've been able to create with all of our youth athletes that are coming out of the woodworks over the last several months, look at our content that we're doing from a social marketing and engagement standpoint, there's a need for products like ours, and we hope to be the leader in that space because it's not um, infant formula, and it's not just straight protein powder for adults. We're trying to fill that goal and ultimately tap into the interesting dynamic of, as a consumer, even in times of financial crisis, there's two things you still spend money on: your pets and your
Your
kids.
kids. Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, that's sort of the where we're at. So at the end of the day, that's
Well, I can see a lot of parallels with what you've previously done, and talking about the idea of taking over a product, really revolutionizing it. You pointed to blocking out the noise, really focusing, and there are so many points there within what NGS is doing to capitalize. And I think the Walmart goes without saying. Most consumers are familiar with it. Walmart is dominating in the US, and the whole idea that you said that 30% is technically the online retail, everyone gets really excited. Oh, I can dominate that. But if 70% is still brick and mortar, you don't necessarily expect tastes and preferences to just change overnight. Yes, there's been this adoption of buying products and services online, but you can still get a sense that people enjoy going out and actually going to the shops and having a browse and a walk. There's more of a
right.
so much more of a process and a shopping methodology behind it. And you can just see that the success that NGS is having within Walmart is a testament, and it's going to continue to grow. But I mean, you mentioned a few points there about the suite and focusing on North America. And for listeners that are unfamiliar with really what the NGS, you could say the parent company, and then you have a suite of different product variations underneath it, Healthy Heights
Mhm.
being one of them. I mean, how do you break down the products that you guys have? And there's a lot of R&D and research that goes into developing them, but are there others that you're looking at bringing to market? You mentioned one earlier, but I mean, how many products are in the suite, and where are you seeing the greatest success with?
Well, right now we have a whole host of things that we've tabled just for resource purposes alone. But the best way to look at our portfolio is we currently are sitting on 4 product families. And then all that differs from that is packaging format and configuration. We have our original legacy item, which we call Grow Daily 3 Plus, which is the first formulation that was developed that was done at Schneider specifically for kids 3 to 9, that helps with linear growth, getting kids back on a healthy growth and height trajectory without obesogenic weight gain. That's where it started. Up until 2 years ago, that's all we had to sell. And then next to that, we have our Grow Daily 10 Plus, which is specifically for boys. So that's our second family of
Mm.
products, specifically shown to help with lean muscle mass growth, as well as maintaining growth velocity in pre-pubertal teenage boys. And what they found was, by maintaining the growth velocity just before they hit the growth spurt, you actually get net gains in height, as well as quality lean muscle growth. So again, lean, healthy growth development, specifically for boys between ages 10 and up. Then we have our kids protein range, which currently consists of a dairy-based, whey-based mixture, which is high quality whey protein with 26 vitamins and minerals, fortified with fruit and veggie powder. That's sort of our Swiss Army knife general nutrition. And that's
Mm.
for anybody over the age of 2. And then we have a plant-based variant of that same formula. And the vitamin mineral profile of the vegan range is just slightly different because we know that there's certain ingredients that somebody following a vegetarian or vegan diet might be deficient in, iron for one, because
Yes.
they're not eating meat. So it's fortified specifically for that particular diet. But it's also, we wanted to have one available because there is a segment of the market that still caters to plant-based proteins. They're not as efficient. They're not as well tolerated. They're also not as easily digestible. So
Mm.
that's likely going to be a smaller niche within the range. And so those are our 4.
Yeah.
We have our preteen girls that was previously developed that we're just waiting for from a resource standpoint to be able to introduce that and launch that into the market. And then we have a sports formulation that we actually are wrapping up conduct of the clinical trial that we started at the beginning of the year. That's basically meant for youth athletes, boys and girls, and it's meant to help with performance gains and maintain sort of that the nutritional needs of a high performing, actual true athlete. And that'll be sort of the family of products, so that we'll have boys and girls of all activity levels, basically from 2 to 16, where we're going to have meaningful quality nutrition. And then it's just about format. So we'd previously developed a bar. We re-engineered and redesigned that bar. Right now, the challenge with bars is really just the fundamentals of it's truly a food. So the shelf life is half of what we get out of our shake mix powders. So you have to have a meaningful amount of distribution before you can even get the supply chain challenge solved. And so that one is going to get introduced at a future point once we start getting some of those bricks and mortar shelves in place, because then we'll be able to manage less than 12 months shelf life on a product.
Mm.
The challenge you have now is you're going to burn 2 to 3 months after you've produced it, just getting it ready to get into the distribution centers. So
Yeah.
you have a very, very small window. That's just too much of a challenge for a company of our scale right now. The same is true with ready to drink or pre-made liquid versions of our product. The challenge that we have isn't really anything other than available capacity. So in North America, what I've learned over the last 2 years is there is no available production capacity for any RTD production facilities outside of 18 months or more.
Oh, wow.
So even if
Okay.
I had $10 million to spend on a batch today, I'd have to wait a year and a half before I could even get in line. And then the other challenge that you have is you have 2 major manufacturing processes, all of which are dictated or governed by the packaging unit they go into. So you have these corrugated Tetra Pak units that look like your milk boxes, aseptic processing, and they're all 8 ounces is the smallest one they make. And of course, we're a 4-ounce serving. So now all of a sudden you're trying to think of how now we're doubling the servings, shortening the half-life, and having to commit to 10 million units, in a production
Mm.
run. That's
Does
just
sound
not
like it's a
feasible.
bit of a
Right.
gamble. Yeah.
Right. And so we'll eventually solve that challenge as well. We've actually got some ideas that ultimately will allow us to unlock different manufacturing processes that'll help be less capacity constrained. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be a challenge similar to the bars where you have logistics and shelf life working against you. But eventually, what I'd love to see is a portfolio where you look at every one of our major product families, and we have the shake mix powders, which are really versatile. You can cook with them, you can make a beverage with them, you can mix them into things and do things with them, and they have 2 years of shelf life. And then have convenience versions of those same things in different food forms, whether it's a bar or chips or other types of things that become part of the meal routine. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all about. And we're trying to establish healthy relationship with food as opposed to, in your training our kids to live their lives drinking from a bottle,
Yeah.
because that's not healthy either. And so at the end of the day, that the rest of the portfolio is going to continue to filter down, and then we'll have one-offs like Happy Tummies, which we're introducing. That's a digestive fiber probiotic supplement that's also complementary to what we're doing, that resides in a different part of the store. So it gives us, again, reach, because we've now got 2 points of distribution within the retailer, and that we
Mm.
have a better chance of catching the consumer's
People's
eyes,
eyes.
because of
Yeah.
course that's the point. And so finding ways where we can be opportunistic to get multiple placement within a given merchandising footprint, and then have products that still speak to what our core focus is, that complement each other. And that's going to be the continued evolution of our portfolio. So we have a handful of items that are basically tabled and ready to be teed up. And then it's just a function of resources. Right now, we want to focus on the here and now. So for the next 6 to 9 months, I don't expect that we'll be introducing anything new beyond what
Yep.
we already have. We're still learning based on feedback and based on sales performance package containers that are more appropriate. So, my biggest challenge that I had when I came on board is our product was one item, was just the Grow Daily 3 Plus, and it was just in bags. And it wasn't even in a retail friendly bag. So it was too tall, too wide,
Just
and just
wasn't
just
efficient
wasn't going to
for the
work. So
style. Yeah.
and so of course my first question when I came in was, has anybody actually gone to a store and walked a shelf to see physically what,
If it
how
fits.
things are
It
sold?
sounds
We
like
don't
a
live
logical, yeah.
Yeah, we don't live, online. And of course, it was also in the middle of the pandemic. So, irony is yes, people were still shopping predominantly on Amazon. But so we had to evolve it and make sure that we found canisters and other containers in order to basically make sure that we're retail friendly. And then just continue to evolve the line. So that's going to continue to change. We'll have different types of canisters. We'll look at um, how the canisters are made. We're going to try to find ways where we can be relevant and conscious about our carbon footprint, as well as, you know, have things that basically meet the perceptions and needs of consumers where they matter most. Of course, the almighty dollar being the biggest element, and just kind of continue to evolve and change. And so there's a lot of things that have happened in material science. Another tangent here, since when the product was originally developed by the researchers. And so we have new carbohydrate sources that are cleaner and better in the eyes of the consumer. We have better soluble fiber ingredients. We have different types of ways to augment back the fats that we need to have in the formulation that are more appropriate so that we don't have to worry about cholesterol levels and triglycerides and such. And
Yeah.
so there's a variety of things that have continued to evolve, and we're going to always look at changes and then
Mm.
make constant improvements even within our core range, so that we're always on the front end and always relevant, because more importantly, being a premium brand, we want to make sure that we have literally the best that science and technology has to offer in our ingredients as well, so that we can sort of maintain that high ground position.
Mm.
And then that's in the end where the sweet spot is, because ultimately we want to be able to have nice high margin, high value products and sort of tapping into that overall high quality perception that consumers are trusting in NGS to
Mm.
deliver.
And you can see that that gives itself a unique complexion as well. And we know that consumers are so much attuned to what they're taking in, and it goes without saying that people are so concerned about what they're feeding their children, and finding the right nutritional blends is incredibly important. And you can see if I tie it back to the Walmart, in the fact that you guys have grown from, I believe it's 408 you mentioned, up to 465 stores.
Yeah.
I mean that's a proof of concept that is working. It's moving off the shelves, but I can imagine that you highlighted there's the next steps and the elevations and rooms to grow. So I mean, going forward over the next 6 to 12 months, especially hitting those retail volumes and increasing, I'm sure Walmart has set you guys benchmarks of what you need to achieve, and that also feeds into your plans of hopefully getting cash flow positive. So where do you see that partnership really accelerating, and potentially some of the other opportunities emerging to elevate NGS and the company?
Yeah, I would say in the next 6 to 12 months, we have a pretty good grasp and handle on what we need to do in order to exceed expectations, and we've been doing that. We actually have our planogram category review with the merchant team coming up. I'm looking at my calendar in a week. So hopefully prior to my trip out to meet with investors, the week of the 18th, this month, I'll be able to also share sort of the outcome from those
Those
conversations.
meetings, yeah.
So we're in a really good position, and for me to be optimistic but also practical, we're over indexing in some core regions that we are underdeveloped as far as points of distribution. So we have a really solid argument and case for basically pushing for store expansion at the next reset, which would be next May. So I fully expect that we're going to be looking at least a doubling, if not possibly even a tripling of our existing footprint for the current item that we've had on shelf since last October. And of course, that just amplifies the revenue potential for those two items. We also know, because they have full visibility of the entire portfolio that they sell online, that the third item within that product family, the flavor of strawberry, is actually outselling vanilla 3-1 and chocolate 5-1.
Wow.
And so we have a really good case to not only see store expansion of the two items that we have in store, but also adding the third so that we have all three flavors on shelf. That's within our reach. That in and of itself, again, like I said, could be a double or a tripler of the revenue coming from that. So then now we're starting to get into a number that's a lot more material and meaningful for
Mm.
us. Because right now it's not a huge number. We're probably generating 25, maybe $30,000 a month on two SKUs in 400 doors. But put it into order of magnitude as we get closer to chain wide with an item. Now you're talking about a single SKU or a single item in at least 75% of distribution at a Walmart. Now you're talking about it generating anywhere from $2 to $5 million annually for a single item. So we're getting closer to that point where we're going to start seeing a lot of momentum picking up and getting significant growth in our points of distribution, which then allows us to put more resources to work, which allow us to drive and untap more consumer demand, which allows us to increase the sales velocity even more. So
Mm.
things start to
So
snowball.
perpetual cycle.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so that's kind of the point that we're at. So I fully expect we're going to be seeing store increases. I also feel pretty confident that we're likely going to add a third item to the mix. And then we haven't even talked about the item we're launching right now.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
of
The
course,
new
all of this
location.
sort of plays together because there's a synergy there. That again, if we get the store increases that we're expecting on kids' protein, and we're in just under 800 doors with Happy Tummies, the review cycles are off by 4 or 5 months from each other, but then there you got a strong case to basically right size the points of distribution between the two. So again, now you've got 4 items on shelf with a significant increase in distribution. And then we haven't even talked about the fact that obviously we're working with CVS and others as well. So next year is going to be an exciting year for us because that's when we're going to start seeing a lot of these major changes
Mm.
take place. The one thing that has never changed in retail is the calendar. They typically don't want to touch their merchant sets or their planograms or modulars more than one time a year. Walgreens, with their vitamin space, is an anomaly where they touch it 2 times a year. But the vast majority of all
Locked in stone for
retailers
12 months.
don't have
Yeah.
enough people to basically do perpetual planning. And you can imagine trying to set a modular in a retail store that has thousands of stores around the country. You don't want to do it but one time. And so
Yeah.
you have a calendar basically that we live and die by. That's the review schedule, and that's never going to change. And so it's just making sure that we're relevant and aware of that cycle, because you
Yeah.
miss it and you're
Then
waiting
you
12 months for the next time around, and there's nothing you can do to change it
Mm.
outside of being frivolous and spending crazy money. So there are some companies that have more money than brains, and they will buy their way in because they can. And so you have a lot of brands over the last couple decades that have been VC backed, where money was no object. And they basically were able to pay slotting in real estate purchases to buy their space on shelf because they were only caring about showing points of distribution before they then sold that business off as an exit strategy to somebody else.
Yeah.
And so that's why you have a lot of volatility in sort of brands not really, the ones
Never
that
getting a
stick
good
because they've
footing.
been around
Yeah.
for decades. Everything else is sort of a fad of the year or two.
Mm.
And so again, as long as we follow the cycle, play by the rules, and understand what the rules are, then we'll be
Puts you in a
fine.
good place.
Yeah, and that's why we need to make sure that we have people in the company that understand how all that works. So when you look at our board makeup, it's important to recognize our chairman, Dave Fenlon, for example. Consumer products really helped grow Blackmore's, really understands also on the pharmacy side, running the Pharmacy Alliance or Platform Alliance group with independent pharmacies throughout Australia. So he understands retail, he understands brand marketing, he understands basically what we need to do. And then we also have Peter Osborne, the counter side of that, also a former Blackmore's expert that's really helped build and establish the Asian markets, specifically for Blackmore's. And then our one of our founding fathers, chief scientific officer, active on the board, Professor Shamir. So we have that sort of clinical aspect, the linkage back to Schneider and where we came from. And then we have our independent directors, Guy and Rachel, that we just recently appointed at our general meeting again that are also sort of checks and balances, because being a public company in Israel, we're required to have at least two external directors that basically are not related to the company, not related to the industry, that essentially come in and basically make sure we're not, you know,
Yeah, keep
telling
you
our own
honest.
stories. Yeah, keeping us
Yes.
on our toes. Bring in financial acumen, different perspectives. But interestingly enough, they both really bring in some quality, tangible value to the group, because they, in Rachel's case, she spent a lot of time with packaged food products like PepsiCo and Lay's, specifically for the Israeli and Middle Eastern markets. And so she's got a lot of food, snack, and sort of product related experience in and around brands and companies, but and is also working with technology, food technologies at the same time. So there's synergies to what we're doing because
Mm.
we're a food supplement, and so there's a lot that we can sort of pull from at the board level as well. So it's a pretty impressive group of people.
Yeah, well, it's been a comprehensive outline of NGS, and a lot of I can see why that you've been put in this position to really accelerate the growth and the sales side of it, given, as we said, your track record in moving companies all throughout your time in the pharma industry. And this is another one that you can already see in as you said, the crawl to walk to run, but being in Walmart, as we allude to, is one of the big steps. But this has been, yeah, just really the scratching of the surface, and there's going to be a hell of a lot more coming out of NGS and Healthy Heights and the product suites and development. So for listeners that are wanting to follow the company and stay on top of its movements, more so from an investor point of view, I'm sure there's the social channels for the products, but that's more North American focus, as we said. Where can they go to stay on top of all the news?
Well, we revamped our corporate site. We've updated our investor center on the NG Solutions website. So if you go to ngsolutions.co, you'll and go straight to the investor center. That's going to give you relevant share price, and then most importantly, media news announcements and releases that we have.
Mm.
We do have, and we've done quite a bit of media exposure, and other campaigns that obviously are important for shareholders to see, so they can see what we're doing and how we're talking about the brand, and all that's available on our website. You're also obviously able to get corporate listings and such on the ASX
Yep.
site under our NGS ticker. And then, of course, you can go to our US consumer-based website, www.healthyheights.com, for information both on the brands, seeing what we sell, as well as information on the company. And then we have a whole variety of links at the bottom that show all of our socials. So we're
Yes.
relevant on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. So
Yeah.
you can get access to all of those on either of our web platforms at the bottom of the page. And then you're also more than welcome to have people reach out. So I'm happy to make myself available. It may be a short email, or maybe even time for jumping on a screen or getting on the phone. But obviously, our biggest need and continued need is going to be making sure that we let people know what we're doing, and how we're progressing, so
Mm.
that hopefully
Yeah,
they get
well,
as excited
and
as we are.
that's why I got you on the podcast, was to do
Yeah.
exactly that. So, no, I appreciate the time, Steve. You've covered a lot during this discussion, and there's only a lot more to come. So I'm looking forward to keeping an eye on NGS and the developments in the US market. So, yes, looking forward to speaking with you again in the future, Steve.
Yeah, well, hopefully next time we'll keep it shorter. I apologize. I know we were shooting for half of this time, but I do appreciate the generosity of letting me ramble. So thank you very
No,
much.
no, no. Excellent conversation, and yeah, wish you luck with it. And yeah, that was fantastic.
Wonderful. Take care. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Market Bull podcast. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow the Market Bull on our socials at Twitter and LinkedIn by searching The Market Bull. You can also subscribe to our newsletter on the website by visiting www.themarketbull.com.au.